Hey, Nerdy Sports Fan here, and we're rebooting the Nerdy Sports Fan Weekly. It wasn't exactly the most viewed thing during the season, but we're going to get something going for the off season, and it's starting now during the playoffs. And the reason is the coaching changes. So, coaching changes normally there's a lot more action. I mean, we've had seasons where there's as many as 10 different coaches that are on the outs and being replaced. And I think a lot of the reason that the coaching changes didn't happen this year is because there's not exactly a lot of premier candidates out there. Typically, we have a handful of coordinators and a handful of college coaches that everybody's really chomping at the bit to get in their organization. And that's really not the case this year. So the best coaching candidates in general this offseason have been Josh McDaniels, who has waffled at best. And everybody's got to be terrified of going into negotiations with that guy based off of what happened last time he was hired as a head coach. Backed out of the deal after the last minute. Like, the dude was hiring staff members and backed out. So, yeah, that's a little rough. But then you have former head coaches in Mike McCarthy, Marvin Lewis, and you'll have, the college name, the only college name that was really out there was Matt Rhule. And it's well-known Eric Bieniemy is a good name out there. Ron Rivera was on the market. So some retread head coaches, maybe one well-known coordinator, and one well-known college coach. Not exactly what we typically get from head coaching searches, and I think that had a lot to that was a big weight in the conversations in the Atlanta owner's office and the San Diego / Los Angeles owner's office. I mean, there was a lot of speculation going on that the Chargers and the Falcons should move forward with a different coach for different reasons. The Chargers coach really, Anthony Lynn has done a good job, but the Chargers desperately need fan base to be energized. And that's not happening right now. I mean, nobody's a freaking Chargers fan out there in LA. It's all Rams all the time. So, yeah, what are they going to do for money? They need to energize their fan base. They need to get some jersey sales going out there. They need to do the baseline foundational things for finances for a business. And that's not happening because the team has no excitement around it. Quarterback's on the outs, and they don't really have that big name money spinner jersey sales guy. Nick Bosa would have been great there. Have both Bosa brothers. That would have been fantastic for jersey sales. But yeah, I can't see anything else outside of a high draft pick now, quarterback, that would really help them. Because there wasn't the big name coach. I mean, you get rid of Anthony Lynn, who are you going to bring in that's going to be really a slam dunk and people are going to get pumped about? Maybe McDaniels. Maybe. But again, owners are terrified of that dude because of the waffling in contract negotiations after the fact. So, yeah, Anthony Lynn, keeping him was smart. In Atlanta, I don't think Dan Quinn should have gotten a chance last year. So the fact that he's still there this year is mind-boggling. But this year, I understand it a bit. Who do you want to hire? Offensive mind, I think, would be the direction because, you had a defensive guy before, you go with an offensive guy next time, see what works. And they have Matt Ryan there, who's still having a problem with the same kinds of mistakes. So maybe an offensive guy would, get a foot in his ass and get him on the right track again. So McCarthy would have been the guy there, but McCarthy, with his resume, has all sorts of options, and from his perspective, a young quarterback or a team that's going to draft very high where he can select his own quarterback would have been the best options. Well, the teams that are drafting really high already really have their coaching figured out. So, they did that last year. Everybody tanked with their new head coaches. So, the Dolphins, the Bengals, these guys got hired last season and are expected to stay with the team at least 2 years from this point. So, yeah, you don't have that high draft pick. So McCarthy was going to want to go to a team that had a quarterback that he thought was pretty good, but also very young. So it really limited it to the Giants, the Cowboys, and the Browns. So, yeah, from the Atlanta perspective, you can't really gain ground by firing Dan Quinn. So I get it. So let's talk about the guys who did get hired and the vacant positions. So the first one off the board was Ron Rivera. Big shock going to Washington. Mostly because Dan Snyder can't typically get out of his own damn way. The guy is the worst owner in all of professional sports. And he's created a toxic culture there. The players never trust the front office. But there's a weird dichotomy there. I mean, when you're in with Dan Snyder, you're in. Okay? That's the kind of treatment that Robert Griffin III got. So, some players swear by the dude. But, the other 80% of players hate his guts. And the front office seems like they're against the players all the time, especially in the medical staff. I mean, that's the issue that Trent Williams has with them right now. So the firing of Bruce Allen was huge for this franchise. You need to get that stain of bad front office relations with the players away from this team. You need to give your new head coach a chance, a fighting chance, to get good players on this team via free agency and retain Trent Williams. So Ron Rivera is the perfect man for that. I think it's very interesting the trends that have occurred in the league. I mean, you can point to Andy Reid and say, yeah, that guy should have a coaching tree. There's something there with that dude, and it's good. You can point to Bill Belichick and say, yeah, that guy should have a coaching tree. He's got a lot of success, so people are going to want to tap into that success. What's been happening weirdly is the former Carolina Panthers regime has now gone out, and 3 different teams have built up from that. The Giants, the Bills, and now Washington is tapping into that. So it really only seems to have worked for Buffalo. The Giants picking up Gettleman, that's been a tire fire. And now Washington going the same route, picking up Rivera. Personally, I thought Rivera was going to be a slam dunk for the Giants because of his ties to Gettleman. But, that's how the NFL works sometimes. Snyder's got deep pockets. He probably just tossed more money at the dude and gave him a lot of control. So Gettleman's a control freak. Everybody knows that. He wants to have his thumb on the organization. So maybe Rivera wanted to be the guy. And personally, I think the best setup, front office wise, is either the GM and the head coach being on par with one another, or the head coach being in charge, where the GM is just doing what the head coach needs. He says, hey, look, I need to find players that kind of suit this mold for this sort of scheme that we're going to be running. Do that for me. And that's the only way that things are going to be on the same page. When the GM is in charge and the coach is a subordinate, you have a lot of situations where the GM is forcing a player on the coach that the coach doesn't want to deal with. And that creates all sorts of problems. So they need to talk to each other. And I don't think that was going to happen if Ron Rivera and Gettleman were together again. So Rivera going to Washington makes a bit of sense. And if he gets control, which he really has at this point, if he retains that after the GM hire, after the draft, it's going to be big for him. He'll be able to put his mark on a franchise, and Rivera's a class act. He knows his stuff. I just hope being the guy, instead of being a guy next to the guy, is going to be good for this franchise. Gettleman is a tire fire. The previous Carolina regime was Gettleman over Ron Rivera. Now Ron Rivera over somebody else might be different. You never know. On the Gettleman topic, dude had to hire Joe Judge. Now, the Giants, they're supposed to be a premier franchise. That's what everybody keeps telling us. But they've been a tire fire for some time now. Ever since they fired Tom Coughlin, the wheels have been falling off for that franchise. So now, Gettleman, in another bid to retain power, has not hired anybody with a name or any real clout. He hired Joe Judge. This guy was largely a special teams coordinator and coach. He got 1 year working with the New England wide receivers. That's definitely not a feather in anybody's cap. Everybody around the league who watches the league understands that the only receiver for the Patriots that's worth a damn is Julian Edelman. And that's definitely not because of Joe Judge. That's because of Julian Edelman. So him coaching the receivers is almost more of a stain on his record. But being a special teams guy and being a Belichick guy, those are good factors. Special teams coordinators are forgotten about in head coaching searches. But John Harbaugh was a special teams guy. And as the head coach of the Ravens, he's won a Super Bowl, and he's well on his way to another one. Marv Levy was a special teams guy. 4 straight Super Bowls. I'm sure there's been plenty others that we can give good examples of. Well, no, not really. There's not plenty others. Nobody hires special teams coordinators. It doesn't make any sense to me. Those coordinators in a lot of coaching staffs actually do just as much, if not more, than the defensive or offensive coordinators. Bill Belichick carries one of the smallest coaching staffs in the league, typically. And he holds a lot of control over both the offense and the defense. So his underling coaches, whether they be a coordinator, a special teams coach, whatever, these guys have a lot of hats. They get involved in a lot of different positions. Obviously, this guy was special teams and wide receivers. That doesn't happen under any other staff. So he's been cross-trained throughout a lot of different positions, and he's learning from the master. So much like Brian Flores with the hire down in Miami, I think Judge is going to be a surprisingly good hire. As long as the stage isn't too big for him in New York, he learned from the right people. So he'll be able to do his job well. Will Gettleman get in the way? That's my issue here. I think Gettleman is the worst thing for the Giants right now. He had a fantastic draft last year. A lot of people have to admit that the Daniel Jones draft pick was far better than anyone anticipated it being. And the rest of that draft worked out really well. They got stronger on defense, and they just had a good influx of very talented young players. They didn't surround them with the right veterans to lead them along the way, but they had a good influx of young talent the past couple of years. They have another good draft. They attract some quality free agents, probably from New England, in order to lay in a culture. The Giants might be able to do something next year. Again, Gettleman has to be hands-off with a lot of the coaching stuff, and he needs to be on the same page with Judge as far as free agents coming in. But I think this can be better than a lot of people anticipate. I think Judge might be just the best hire they could have made this year. And if they could have held out till next year, maybe they would have had better options. But I still think it's going to end up being more solid than people think. So In Carolina, Matt Brule called the Giants and said, hey, this is what Carolina's offering me. You going to match? And they said, fuck no, because David Tepper down in Carolina is bucking the trend with how much you hire first-year head coaches at. He's giving this guy about $10 million a year. It's a 7-year, $70 million-ish contract. He's never coached an NFL game. But this is part of the trend. You hire young, offensive-minded, possibly college coaches, or just college coaches in general. These guys that work with very creative systems that really haven't been in the NFL in the past decade, and have only come in maybe the past year or so. Well, just go right to the source. Don't ask an NFL coach to coach like the college guys have been. Just go right to the source. Find a great college coach who's doing that sort of thing and put him in the NFL. See what happens. Arizona was surprisingly good last year. They're really young, and the coach needs some time for the game management to develop, but I think they looked far better than people anticipated they would. And there's no reason for another college coach to not be able to do that. He's got to be the right guy. I think Brule might be. If you look at his Baylor record, 3 years at Baylor. He had 5 years at Temple before that, but 3 years at Baylor. His first season, they were 1-11. His last season, they're 11-3. Big change. And that's Matt Brule. That's entirely him. In college ranks, the coach is in charge of so freaking much. He's essentially the GM and the coach and like a marketing rep. Big program college coaches have a lot on their plate. They have to get the talent to show up, and they have to coach and develop the talent. And it's not a matter of salary caps and who you throw the money at. There's no money. So you have to sell kids on a culture and get them to buy into you as a person. And he was able to do that at Baylor. He will be able to continue to do that. He will be able to sell his culture. He will be able to get people to buy into him as a person. It's a matter of whether or not his schemes and philosophies work at the NFL level. What we've seen over the years is the main problem with college coaches coming into the NFL is protection. The offensive line play is extremely different at the NFL level because the speed is so different at the NFL level on defense. So a lot of the things that work in college ball, protection and blocking scheme-wise, definitely do not at the NFL level. And you have to be much more creative with a smaller set of things that you can do on the offensive line. You have to find a way to get that creative offensive game plan while still making sure that you actually have the time to do it. And that's the issue that most of these college coaches have, is they formerly had much more time to develop a play. But when they come to the NFL, their blocking scheme doesn't hold up, and now something that needs a couple seconds to develop has a second and a half, and it just gets blown up in the backfield, and it looks like shit. Hopefully that doesn't happen for Brule. Hopefully he comes into this situation knowing that and prepared for it. He's only got 1 year of NFL experience at any level, and it was a very basic level coach. So he's not going to be able to hire a staff from contacts. He's going to have to hire a staff from reputation. So when he brings his staff together, he's likely not going to have a personal relationship with a lot of the people if he brings anybody with NFL experience into the fold, which is highly recommended because he doesn't have any. But again, it's going to be a challenge of culture and personalities. He's going to have to bring the right people into the room in order to make sure that he's not butting heads with them, but still gets what he needs out of them experience-wise. It'll be interesting to follow, but I do think Matt Brule is definitely a game-changing kind of hire. I hope it works out. It definitely means in Carolina, Cam Newton's out. Okay? Cam Newton is gone. They're going to get another quarterback. It might be Kyle Allen. Likely not. They're going to trade away assets, find a way to get up in the draft, to get the right position, to get the quarterback they want. I think Justin Herbert makes a lot of sense to them at this point. They're not going to get one of the top two guys. But the kid out of Oregon, on a lot of boards, falls down into that late top 10 to late teens, depending on what analyst you're looking at. I'll have my personal big board coming out next week for the draft. But Carolina's going to draft a quarterback. They're going to rebuild this entire franchise. They're going to jettison Cam Newton, start from scratch, culture first, and we'll see how it works. Now, the Browns still have an opening. The Browns are the only team that still has an opening. And at this point, why not wait? Interview as many people as you can. Get the best candidate. Personally, I think the best remaining obvious candidates are Josh McDaniels and Eric Bieniemy. Eric Bieniemy is getting a raw deal. He should get a lot better pull with his credentials and the franchise that he's coming from. I don't know what the heck's going on here, but people are treating him like a token interview, and that's shit. That is absolute bullshit. He is coming from a point of experience, a franchise that has produced a lot of good coaches around the league, at least a man who has produced a lot of good coaches. Andy Reid, new head coaches just kind of pop out from underneath that guy left and right. Every season, one of his assistants is strongly considered for head coaching positions around the league. Why Eric Bieniemy is being passed up, I don't know. I really don't. But I think he's a good fit for the Browns job. I think they're going to want somebody like McDaniels, but that fear of what the heck McDaniels has done in his contract negotiations and backing out of what would have been a good hire for the Colts, there's a stink there around that dude. And I don't think he's going to get hired by any other team. I think everybody else assumes that he just wants to step in as the head coach of New England as soon as Belichick retires. But who knows when the heck that's going to happen. Brady's probably going to get another 1 or 2 years. And Belichick's going to want to hang out for that, I'm sure. So McDaniels, he had his best opportunity to go coach a new team with the Colts, I think. And he might have squandered his shot at being viewed as a legitimate head coach with how he handled backing out of that contract. Eric Bieniemy, I think, is a good fit. I think it would have been a better fit if they kept Dorsey. So this restructuring that the owner demanded of Dorsey is the reason Dorsey left. Has nothing to do with the man getting forced to move out of the franchise, being fired, or anything like that. The owner wanted more say-so in the process. He wants to be a Jerry Jones. He wants to be a Dan Snyder. Well, we see how well that works for Jerry Jones or Dan Snyder. The owners that are more involved in the process are the worst owners in the sport. They're the reason their teams are bad, typically. So I think John Dorsey getting forced out is the worst thing for the Browns. He built an extremely, extremely talented roster and was forced to hire the head coach that the owner wanted, who was a total piece of shit. Yeah, Dorsey's not the reason that they were bad last year. The head coach was. And the head coach was a forced hire because the owner wanted them to go with Baker Mayfield's preferred choice. Baker Mayfield has done nothing in this league. and never should have been given any amount of power over a coaching decision. He got what he wanted, and it turned into a big steaming fucking turd. So, yeah. The owner of the Browns is the reason the Browns are going to be bad for a very long time. They pushed Dorsey out the door. That's probably making it so good coaching candidates like Bieniemy and McDaniels avoid that place like the plague. I see them getting stuck with an also-ran or a lesser name coach who's going to get stuck with a power structure that nobody wants to deal with the owner being heavily involved with front office decisions. The front office was doing great, and now the wheels are falling off again. Again. I am sorry, Cleveland fans. Really am. Your best bet is Bieniemy. You probably won't get him. So on to Dallas. Dallas made the big swing. Jerry Jones needed to get out of his own damn way. He needed to stop hiring puppets as head coaches. He needed to stop hiring guys where he said, look, it's my team. You just, deal with it on Sundays. That can't be the case anymore. It can't be. Jones needs to get the hell out of the way and let somebody who knows more about this game be the person who takes the responsibility. And that's what's going to happen with McCarthy. McCarthy's a no-nonsense guy. And if you look at his coaching resume, he is every bit as qualified as Sean Payton. His NFL record, intensely similar. They've both won one Super Bowl. They're both very good at winning their own division. Decent record in the playoffs. Good, not great. Nobody's bad-mouthing Sean Payton. But for whatever reason, Mike McCarthy gets the stink eye because Aaron Rodgers didn't really gel with him. That's crap. Okay? Mike McCarthy's a damn good coach. And he's a huge upgrade over Jason Garrett. Cowboys fans got not necessarily what they wanted, but absolutely what they needed. Mike McCarthy working with Dak Prescott is going to be what brings this franchise into the prominence it should have been in. I'm calling it right now. The Cowboys are going to win the division next year. And it's because they're finally going to have somebody to wrangle in this talent and check this franchise. Put everybody in the place where they need to be and tell them to shut the fuck up and deal with it. That's what they've needed for years, and they finally have it. Some of the players won't like it. Some of the players are going to need to be jettisoned in order to keep the locker room with one singular message. But it doesn't matter. It does not matter. This is exactly what the Cowboys needed. Enough of that talented roster will stay in place to have exactly what McCarthy needs to drive and force this franchise into the playoffs. Eagles fans are going to be very sorry that the last 2 seasons have been squandered by injury, because they're not going to get the easy ride that they got the past few years. The Cowboys are going to be legit again. And with the roster they already have for the Cowboys, now adding a coach that's not going to be in his own way, huge. Congrats to the Cowboys. I'm sorry, Cleveland. And I'm really hopeful for what's going on in Pantherland. That's what I've got for today. Like and subscribe if you enjoy the content. Next week, we'll be diving more into the pre-draft process and hopefully talking about Cleveland actually hiring a head coach. We'll see you next week.